I grew up thinking that my father wore a tie to work. Then I went into his trunk and found a paint-stained toolbox, weighted down by a secret, and everything that I thought about him changed. I'm telling you this the way that you say something out loud at 2 o'clock in the morning, because otherwise you will not be able to rest. My dad was a man in a button-down shirt, light blue, always a size too big, sleeves rolled once. He left at 7:10 a.m. every weekday like a clockwork, coffee in a thermos, kiss on the crown of my head even after I grew taller than that habit. He went to the office, and I imagined it was beige cubicles and a break room fridge stocked with someone else's yogurt. Numbers. Emails. Meetings that should have been emails. You know, adult purgatory. He had his things. He balanced our checkbook in an old ledger with a pencil, as if the budget might behave better under graphite. He folded plastic grocery bags into tight triangles. He never paid for shipping on principle. And he kept the thermostat at 68, even in February, which I fought like it was a human rights issue. He saved receipts like they were love letters. We waste nothing, he'd say, patting the jar of pennies on the counter like a friend. It drove me insane. I was a teenager. It was my job to roll my eyes and wish he'd just, be normal and not care that the light was on in the empty hallway for 5 minutes. Still, he showed up hard for me. When my mom worked nights, she's a nurse and had this glow that didn't always include us, he came to everything. He filmed my 8th grade play with that dad-level concentration like he'd been hired by Spielberg. He waited in the car during robotics club, engine off to save gas, reading the manual for our lawnmower because you should know your machines. Saturdays he'd bring home bagels, 2 for us, 1 for the freezer. He never said no to ice cream, but he'd park and make us walk 2 blocks because the lot is daylight robbery. He was funny like that, slow and stubborn and steady. If I'm being honest, we weren't movie close. He was a man who carried his feelings like heavy furniture, quietly, careful not to bump the walls. When I got accepted to the college I dreamed about, his face did this twitchy thing between pride and panic, like his mouth couldn't decide whether to smile. I heard the chair scrape late that night and found him at the kitchen table with financial aid forms. He'd circled numbers until the page went bald. "We'll make it work," he said. His voice was firm, and I believed him because when it came to me, he made everything work. Still, I saw how he started wearing that shirt twice before doing laundry. I saw him say no to the lottery tickets he used to joke about. I saw him start making coffee at home instead of grabbing one on the way. Little frugal shifts that made me feel like my dream was a theft. I also began to notice strange things, and perhaps you'd assume that I'd figure it out, but hindsight's rude like that. He'd come home some nights with his hands scraped up, Band-Aids wrapped haphazardly over his knuckles. He'd brush it off. "Paper cuts," he said, and that didn't make any sense for spreadsheets, but I let it slide. Certain clothes of his smelled like, not the office. Like sawdust and a metallic scent, like a garage after rain. Once there was paint dust on his forearm, those tiny constellations by his wrist, and he hurriedly brushed it away when I looked. He'd mutter stuff like, "Old Mrs. Riley's sink is being a cranky pants," and I would laugh, like, "Since when are you buddy-buddy with your colleagues' pipes?" One Saturday, I needed the jumper cables because my car, his old car, was playing dead. He'd taken his and texted me the trunk code. "Careful," he added, "there's some stuff in there." I popped it open expecting a tangle of reusable bags and maybe a rusty umbrella. Instead, it was a hardware store exploded in the dark. The toolbox was industrial yellow and scarred, edges dented like it had lived a life. Inside, a drill with the bit still warm, a fat roll of plumber's tape, a pipe wrench heavy enough to double as a weapon in a crime novel, a flashlight caked with drywall dust, gloves with the fingers molded to someone's grip. Tucked in the corner, a spiral notebook with invoices, actual invoices, names, addresses, amounts. R. Alvarez, leaky faucet, $1.60. Perez, replace light fixture, $1.40. Cash only. My heart beat that panicky thud that fills your eardrums. I clutched the notebook as though it would burn me. The writing was neat, careful. There was a receipt pocket from a hardware store on the other side of town. Reading cock and hacksaw on a piece of paper in my dad's loopy D made me lightheaded. All this while, what had he been doing? Weekends out doing errands, naps thick as a curtain when he returned. He had a second phone in the glove compartment, an old flip phone, and I swear almost dropped it when it vibrated out a message. "Hey Dave, toilet's overflowing again. Come by before noon. We'll pay extra." The Monroes. I totally lost it for a moment. Sometimes your mind goes for the most extreme option because it stings any less than the mundane reality. Was he doing some sort of crime? Working off the books? Getting conned? Was he in jail? In debt? Did he? Is this how one gets into double lives? Did he have another family? My own mind was bad TV. I was both silly and terrified. I didn't tell him. I shoved the cables under my arm, clicked the trunk shut tighter than necessary, and passed the afternoon staring at my ceiling for answers. When he walked into the room, it smelled like rain and lemon cleaner. He placed a 6-pack of paper towels into a caddy and wooed the air conditioner, 68, like always. I observed him wringing his right hand around, as though it hurt him, before noticing me staring and sticking it into his pocket. He asked me how my day went. I asked him the same. He told me nothing that stilled the buzzing in my head. The next Saturday, when he left early, I followed him. I know. It sounds dramatic, but I was 20 and stupid and raw. He took the long way down Maple, past the high school where the goalposts were always peeling, past the laundromat with the janky neon open sign that flickered ope. He stopped in front of a little white house that had surrendered its paint to the years. The porch sagged in the middle. The yard was a beige of dead weeds. A woman opened the door, hair pulled back in a bandana, baby on her hip, a boy in Superman pajamas hiding behind her leg. Dad went in. His step changed when he crossed that threshold. He stood up straighter. He wasn't the soft-shouldered, office-tired man I knew. This is going to sound weird, he looked like my dad if he believed he could fix anything. I sat a block away, idling low in the car, feeling like a stalker and a bad daughter. It was cold, and I wore this idiot hoodie that wasn't sufficient, but I was keyed up and couldn't go. An hour went by. People went out and did their Saturday rituals. The man and the tiny dog walked by twice. My tongue felt like old gum, nerves chomping away. Then the door of the tiny house opened, and there was my father, carrying a toilet tank lid cradled in both hands like a cake. He placed it carefully down next to a support column on the porch, wiped the sweat off his forehead with the backs of his wrists, and laughed at something the woman was telling him. He laughed. I hadn't heard that stupid, unprotected kind of laughter in ages. It was goofy and idiotic, like middle school coaches laugh. He went back inside. When at last he emerged for real, he was out on the porch tallying something. The woman, her eyes weary yet nice, shoved bills into his hand, and he indicated no. They quarreled, teasing initially and afterwards not. She forced the money at him, and he shoved it away. He took only some of it, stashed it into a shirt pocket, and scribbled something on a tiny pad. When he turned, I withdrew into a shell, yet he did not see me. He was off to a different location. I knew because my father doesn't dawdle. He is either someplace or en route. I thought that I would be able to continue the spy shtick, but the neighborhood seemed to plot against me. At the next house, a more respectable one with a well-manicured hedge and a mailbox that was a barn shape, the door swung open before he had a chance to knock. A guy in a paint-stained t-shirt invited him in, rambling about wires. 10 minutes went by, and I got a glimpse of my own stupid car in their front window, and that was it. The wife emerged, folded her arms, and stared at me. "Okay, are you okay?" she asked, tilting her chin at me like she was aware of the type of sitting that isn't an option. "I'm expecting someone," I stated, voice breaking all of its bones into a lie. She smiled, slow. "You're Dave's girl, aren't you?" The world shifted, ever so slightly. He talks about you all the time," she told me. "He's a perfectionist." "My husband thinks that man's part magician," she laughed. "We even offered him more last time. No way would he accept. Told us the extra goes into your college fund, and no way can he cheat his own girl." Everything inside me dropped through the floor. I couldn't say a word. My face did a humiliating something. She observed, and her smile eased some more as she took in the surprise she'd just pulled. "Oh, honey," she exhaled, as if she'd walked all over my tail. "You didn't know?" "No, I didn't." "Of course not." He hadn't informed me. He was getting up Saturdays in his worn hoodie and those boots that I had always assumed for yard work, and he was clearing clogged drains and fixing light fixtures and replacing one shattered porch light. And he was giving the money to the man that I saw in the mirror each morning. My heart ached. My tongue felt like metal. I nodded as though I was okay and began the car so that I might escape before tears fell in front of a stranger's grass. On the way home, it was like each stingy act he'd ever committed rose up and justified itself to me one at a time. The coin jar, the brief showers, the stew that became soup that became we're stretching it. The way that he watched me open acceptance letters with his hands planted on his hips like he was holding something up. I remembered wanting to be 13 and insisting upon a pair of sneakers just like all the popular girls, and him opting for us to get you some that last longer, and me slamming my door so hard the picture frame shook. God, I needed to go back in time and close my trap. I got home and sat in the garage with the door down, just me and the smell of oil, sobbing quietly like you do when you don't want the house to know. The toolbox was still in the trunk. I opened it and ran my fingers over his tools like they were relics. There were notches worn in the handle of the wrench where his fingers knew exactly where to go. His hands were maps no one bothered to read. There was a little folded note tucked under the tray: Home Depot, return, ask about refund policy. Even his scraps had a plan. When he walked in, I was back in control enough to act like a human. He removed his boots at the door, as always, and stopped for a minute to massage his ankle because it always hurt him when it was cold. He spotted me and his entire face eased that make me look like a little boy melt. Hey, kiddo, he said. You eat? You work on weekends, I said. It was said too fast, too abruptly. He froze. A solid 5 seconds of nothing. He looked at me, at the ground, at his hands. He swallowed. We're okay. He walked over to the sink, washed his hands as if it was absolutely necessary, like he would be able to rinse off this conversation. The water ran for more than it needed to. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. My voice shook. It annoyed me that it did. He turned off the water, dried his hands on his jeans, stared at the black blotch the water had left. He was composing a sentence that would not give away that much. Finally, he said, because you would have made me quit. I laughed. It was not funny. Yeah, I would. I would have told you to quit working yourself to death repairing other people's toilets. He massaged the back of his neck. I'm not breaking. You're limping. It's old, he said, as if that was okay. He leaned against the counter and looked at me. Listen, when my dad was ill, he stopped Rewound. We didn't have anyone who could. Up here. We made do. We always made do. I know how, and I have 2 working hands, and you got into the school, that is. You know. He smiled, by way of apology. It made my chest feel like fireworks. And then I looked at the numbers and my chest did not feel like fireworks. He released a breath. So I did something that I can do. That's it. Why keep it a secret? He stared at the window, into the blackness. Because I was hoping that you would be happy, not guilty. He said the word guilty as if it hurt him a little, either uttering it or knowing it was already a part of me. He shook his head. Pay for what I can is my duty, not a gift. You're my kid. I want to be useful. I couldn't maintain my shape any longer. I slipped down the cabinet onto the floor, like one would in films, but it's more awkward in real life. He sat also, cracking his knees, because we did stuff together even when we didn't know what we were doing. He took my hand. His thumb traced over the fleshy bit between my thumb and index, this tiny comforting behavior from when I was young and terrors consisted of the dark. I would have made it out of state, I said. I would have. He nodded. I know. He talked in a low voice, as if he did believe me. And I would have done it anyway. Perhaps not that much. But I would have. You know why? I shook my head, tears climbing out of my eyes without my consent. Because when you were 7, he told her, you organized all the stuffed animals and instructed them in long division. Because you worked till midnight that one time in the 9th grade in order to repair a science project that was abandoned by a partner. Because when life hands you those big doors, you kick through it in your little shoe. I'm not going to be the one that makes certain that you don't. This doesn't go that way. We sat there for a while, leaning against the cabinets, watching the stove clock pretend to be important. I thought about all the Saturdays he'd given away to other people's broken things so my life could be less broken later. Part of me wanted to stomp my foot like a child and make him promise to quit. Part of me wanted him to be this unbreakable machine who would never get tired. There's no good answer, just the slippery truth. Love means choosing to carry what you're not sure you can, and hoping someone will take a corner when you can't. The next week, I made a plan. I applied for 3 scholarships until the application essays blurred. I went to the financial aid office and was annoying in a way that I would previously have avoided out of Midwestern politeness. I said, what else can I do, in a voice that didn't care about sounding needy. I picked up 2 shifts at the campus cafe. They let incoming students start early. I learned the sound of the grinder at 6 a.m. It sounded like responsibility and burnt beans. When I told him, his face lit up like I'd unraveled some puzzle that he'd been tightening by hand for months. "We're a good team," he said. We always were. We also made a rule that I could veto Saturday jobs if he was limping or if he did that thing where he sat down and didn't stand up for too long. He pretended to hate the rule. He also followed it, even if it meant rearranging a job. He showed me his world, too. One Sunday, he let me patch a hole in our apartment wall where the door handle had punched through. "It's like frosting a cake," he said, guiding my hand with the putty knife. My cake was lumpy. He smoothed it out and told me lumps are okay. They sand down. We replaced a light fixture, and he taught me how to turn off the breaker so I wouldn't die. We replaced a faucet, and he let me learn the dance with the plumber's tape. I never knew how much a sink could fight back. He never made me feel stupid for not knowing. Every time we finished, he'd nod like we'd just won a quiet award. The request I was consistently fearful of, "Why didn't we have more?" became a new one. "How do we make what we have work?" This transformation was a relief in a way that surprised me. I was beginning to view his rituals as provision and not possession. The heater at 68 became less like a withholding and more like a hug that cost $1. I found myself folding a plastic bag into a triangle one afternoon and laughed, big and real. I sent him a photo. "Look what you've made me," I told him. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji and a heart and was still learning how to speak in images. I went to school in the fall. Not the shiny one with the Gothic buildings and leaf-blown quads of my teenage dreams, but the one that had everything I needed and enough of what I wanted. It turned out my dreams weren't brand-specific. I took a work-study job fixing the printers in the library, and it was weirdly satisfying, like I was my father in some genetic way, coming alive when things that were broken became less broken in my hands. He retained a few Saturday clients because he's obstinate and because other people have sinks and ceilings, and these don't wait for anyone's wish list. But he stopped taking every offer. He began taking "I come on Tuesday," like his time was as valuable as everyone else's. He began charging reasonable prices, and it took me, 3 weeks to persuade him that this was holy behavior. We constructed spreadsheets together. He made me train him how to use podcasting apps. Sundays, we'd prepare a giant pot of something that improved with age. I'd call him from the laundry, and we'd swap hack for getting out stains. If that sounds dull to you, it's because I'm describing it incorrectly. It was like developing vocabulary that we should have learned years ago. The day that I was arriving at the dorm, he lifted the box of books and grunted in this ridiculous way. "Feels like you've got a future in there," he said. He set my 2 mugs down like relics. He tried to straighten up my lopsided bed, and I told him not to fix it. It felt like us. Before we shared a hug for goodbye, he handed me this small envelope. Written on the flap was "in case of emergencies," and that was our inside joke for "we are scared and we don't know how to admit it." In it was a 50, 2 quarters taped to a sticky note, and a code sheet that he told me to memorize because if something happens, you need to be able to get in. It was terrifying and responsible and very him. After he left, I sat on my new bed in my new life and cried a little, not mourning, just expanding. I could see every Saturday he had given away for me like fence posts lining a long road, and I felt this wave of gratitude that almost knocked me over. Love, I've learned, rarely announces itself. It doesn't send flowers to work or post a video with a sunset filter. It shows up at 7 a.m. with a bucket, tape, and a wrench. It learns the stubborn rhythm of someone's home so their faucets run right and their lights turn on. It hides a toolbox in a trunk because the person it loves shouldn't have to carry the weight of that choice. I still wonder about that one moment in the garage, the toolbox ajar like a secret. I wonder about the woman on the porch unaware that she was the messenger in a narrative that I'd been composing in my mind for years. I wonder about teen me, so confident that love was yes, that missing that love is also 1,000 deliberate no's. No, we're not going out for dinner tonight. No, we're not getting that label. No, we're not cranking up the heat. Not because we're unable, but because we opt for later over now. That's not a denial. That's a sacrifice. Even now, at times, I find myself flinching at the little things, he preserving the sauce out of a can like it's exotic, Rez using foil, stockpiling rubber bands. And I imagine his hands, scarred and mending, clasped around a wrench, removing some other man's dilemma so mine might be fixable. I owe him more than a thank you. I owe him a life that isn't taken for granted like it was handed me. I owe him choices that would make him give a satisfied grunt and say, "Now you're thinking." Not because of shame, because of heritage. So yes, my father's moonlighting was not glamorous. You don't receive awards for gaskets replaced in a 12-month span. But when I walked into the financial aid department that spring and laid out 2 more scholarships and a new chart we'd worked out together, the woman smiled and said, "You've got some people in your corner." My thoughts went back to my father's toolbox and a warm feeling. "I do," I said. "The best kind." If you've ever had someone who held your life together from the quiet side, pick up the phone and call them, and if that's you, I see you. Your love is grout in the tile, unseen but supporting the entire goddamn floor. That matters. More than you know. If any of you have ever had an experience like that, I would love for you guys to give some feedback in the comment section. And if this story has touched you even a bit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and press that bell button.